Praise the Lord. Okay, I would be brief and very explanatory. In November 2021, I was diagnosed with a very terrible illness. A case whereby the water in my body was more than the blood in my body. So I was mostly on antibiotics. I was surviving on antibiotics. I couldn't scale through 1 week without having to take those antibiotics. So it went on and on, November, December, January 2022. I stopped taking those medications because it was really telling on me. I lost weight, I was drying up, my veins were obviously out. And I wasn't fully recovered when something very terrible befell me again. It got to that time of the month for my monthly flow. And for something that is supposed to last for a maximum of 5 days, or let's say 7 days, for the females in the house, you would understand. It lasted for 2 months. I was bleeding heavily for 2 months. I could not tell my mother, because of course, African parents, you would have to explain what you did and what you didn't do. So I kept to myself. I went on for a series of tests because I was confused. For somebody who was on antibiotics, who was told that the blood in your body is very little and there is more water, how come was I bleeding this much? So it went on and on. Every day I would use a maximum of 8 sanitary pads. And that's 1 pack. And this bleeding lasted for 2 months. It got to April. I saw the flyer online and I attended. I came here with so much doubt, so much disbelief. I was angry, I was mad, I was almost giving up. And then I saw people worshiping, people thanking God. They were waving their hands, and I was like, how? How can I really worship? How? With all of these things, because I was bleeding that day, even more heavy than other days. I was checking, I hope I'm not stained or something.
Which of the edition is that?
April edition last year, yes. April edition last year. I came, Illumination to be precise. So everybody was all happy, they were thanking God, they were worshiping. And at that point, I could not find the balance. I kept on asking, how can I really worship you? In spite of all of this. My only resolve then was to sing a particular song. And after I sang that song, the next thing I said was, Abba, you are good, and your mercy endures. And then I felt something drop from my body. I was thinking, okay, it's the usual droppings. I went back home, I checked, the flow was still there. And I was like, really, after I had to gather myself and worship, and I still got back home with the same illness. Then that night, I had a dream. And in that dream, I was walking down to this church, singing the same song I sang right on the very same spot where I was seated. I was singing the same song. I was coming happily in that dream, coming for Upper Room Experience, April edition. And then I met a youth of this church. He walked out and he handed over to me a flower pot. A pot that contains flowers that were already sprouted out. And I received it with so much joy. And I was like, wow, I've been looking for this thing. And immediately I got up from that dream. The flow stopped. It was, thank you very much. It was at that time that I realized that my deliverance was in my worship. Because, of course, I fasted, I prayed. I was questioning God, why me? I am not the woman with the issue of blood. I am Juliet. It was at that time that I realized that my deliverance was in my worship. that my healing was in a heart that is given to God. So I am standing here before you because I made a promise to God that day that I would come back next year, April edition, to tell God's people that I have seen the Messiah. I cannot keep quiet. So I would indulge every one of us that it is important that we know that in as much as you are seated by maybe your friend, your husband, surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, it is important that we are aware that we are in the presence of God's mighty angels. And God is in this place, and He is not joking. In fact, the devil himself is not joking. So I pray that we encounter God strongly even while we are seated here. Because what would have happened to me if I had not come here that day? I was filled with so much doubt, so much disbelief. I almost gave up. But God came through for me. The same God that advises in worship. That even with all of those weaknesses, all of those struggles, the portal to God's power, God's healing was opened right here. So you really do not understand what God actually did. For ladies here, you would understand that bleeding is not easy. With the pains, the headache, the fever, everything, the mood swings, I had to go through that thing for 2 good months without telling anybody. And science called it hormonal imbalance, really. But then God came through for me. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you.